So let's get started. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning from wherever you're joining us all around the world. This is the very first webinar by MediaForce Communications. MediaForce Communications is a full service marketing and communications company situated in Kenya. And we've planned a round of modules and trainings, specifically on different aspects that we interact with in our day-to-day activities. So for this webinar this afternoon, we're going to cover digital safety and security. I'll allow my colleague to introduce himself before we proceed with the first. So as a matter of housekeeping, if anyone among us has a question, we will have a question and answer session at the end of both presentations, which will take approximately 10 to 15 minutes each. We will have an extended question and answer session, which will help us interact a little bit more. Ansem, proceed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Collins. As you've just said, my name is Ansel Mushura. I'm the lead web developer for MediaForce Communications. And I just want to welcome all of you guys thank you for joining this session. And I hope it will be great benefits for you all.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ansem. So my name is Collins Omogo. I'm the creative director at MediaForce Communications. So today I'll be walking us through email security. So sometimes we might ask ourselves, why on earth would someone in this day and age teach me about emails? I've been using emails all my life. I've been employed for 5, 10, 15 years. I know everything I need to know about emails. But the thing to note is that email is one of the most important aspects in communication for any organization, and it forms the primary doorway and means and point of contact between you and the outside world. So if you leave your doorway unguarded, that means that anyone can get in and out of your organization unauthorized, and that poses so many risks to your organization. So without good planning, anticipation, and management, all your resources and information are at risk if you don't manage your emails well. So it's important to set up proper security safeguards so that we do not leave our doors open for anyone to come into our servers or our emails and read any and all information that pertains to our clients or what we do as an organization. So to minimize these risks, it is important that we identify all potential exposures. We carry out periodic trainings within the organizations and also to the people that we serve, so that we are able to mitigate these risks, these potential risks. So as I've said, this is not something new, but it's just an effort to reinforce your muscle memory, so that at any point that you're interacting with your emails, at any point that you're trying to respond to emails, there are things that you take into consideration, and you're always safe. As we always say, it's better safe than sorry. So for a start, let's take a look at the common email vulnerabilities. So at the primary level, hackers sometimes expose you to malicious software. So you'd find you're sent an email that you don't recognize, and within that email, there's either software, programs, links that lead to suspicious sites that may cause harm to your working environment. So what you're meant to do is do not click any link that you do not know, that has not been sent to you by someone that you know. And if there's any link or any file that ends with the extension .com, .exe, or .html that you do not recognize, do not click on it. The other point that hackers might use is social engineering. So social engineering just means that someone masquerades or tricks you into thinking that they're something they are not. So they could trick you that you've won something. They could trick you into filling in a form, just in an effort to make sure that you've provided them with the information that they need from you. This could be a password or an email address that gives them access to your systems. The next point that people come into contact with potential security risks are spam and phishing attempts. So the good thing is that most mainstream email service providers have spam filters, but you find in most corporate organizations, some spam go past the filters and you're able to come into your main inbox, and those might trick you into disclosing information that is sensitive. So the idea here is, if you see an email that you did not expect to get and that does not relate to anything that you do not open it, do not click it, do not respond. The next point is in terms of vulnerabilities that affect emails are denial of service attacks. So these are what we usually refer to as email bombs. So the hackers sent multiple instructions to your email servers or your emails, and they overwhelm your servers so much such that they cannot function optimally and limit their suitability to serve as an email server. So what that means is that you cannot communicate, you cannot send out emails, you cannot receive. And Google also blocks you, and other email providers block your domain from being able to communicate. The final vulnerability is called a man in the middle attempt. What this means is that there's always someone who comes in to intercept email communications between you and the target person that you're trying to establish contact with. So having someone intercept your communications means that if there's any sensitive information, such as payment information, contact information, and so on, this person is able to read this and get whatever they need to get. It could be someone who comes in between you and your client and points your client into paying money into an account that is not your company account. And you end up spoiling or ruining your reputation just from an email vulnerability. So the whole point here is to ensure that we create management, operational, and technical safeguards that are necessary to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all the needs that we need to have to ensure systems work without fail. So as an example, for example, on the right, you'll see how we normally log into Outlook. So a hacker could come into your computer, pretend to be you, a very good person, use your email or pretend to be someone else that you recognize. And then they set the email, the name that you see and the email as something that you see. But the login information that they use to log in is now the suspicious login. So they cloak or they hide or they trick you into thinking that there's something that they're not. And then they are able to now hack into your systems or get information from you that you would not ideally give them if you knew who they were. So what are the safeguards that we should take in order to prevent these vulnerabilities that happen due to email safety concerns? So the first and the main thing that we should do is to create awareness through regular training of team members. This is because throughout the world, all hackers rely on ignorance as a primary point of contact. So if you do not know, you'll be hacked. You could call it as bad luck, but the whole point is if you're not aware and if your team is not aware, or if it's only one person within the organization that are not aware of the email safety concerns, then you might end up facing vulnerabilities because now they will be the point of entry into your organization for the hacker. The next thing is to ensure that there are reliable management controls, such as email communications policies, to ensure people know how and why and when to use emails. The other thing is to keep under lock and key the configuration controls such that only a select number of people are able to change names, for example, to change passwords, to change email addresses within your organization. That ensures that you manage your server pretty good. The next consideration is within your servers or within your email service, just ensure that you only have software and tools that you need and uninstall any tools that you don't need. Also, it's important to standardize your email configurations. What this means is if you're using Outlook, make Outlook a standard email service for your entire organization. If you're using G Suite, use G Suite. If you're using Office 365, use that. So what that does is, if there's an email vulnerability, you're able to trace from start to finish, as opposed to having a troubleshooting method from one provider to the next to the next. Another consideration is ensure that all your emails are transmitted through an encrypted service. So if your email transmission is secure and encrypted, that means that if anyone intercepts or comes in between you and the person you're trying to reach, whatever they intercept is encrypted. They can't read anything. Another consideration would be to ensure that all your emails have a timeout in case someone leaves their computer unattended. And this is important for when you're going to meetings, seminars, and sometimes you just leave your laptop out in the open. Ensure that there's always a logout, automatic logout in case your browser remains open for a long time. Secondly, we also need to enable two-step verification for all our email access, to ensure that if you're logging into a computer that you've never logged into before, you get an SMS or an email on your phone that verifies that it's you that indeed needs to log in. Finally, in any case there's an attempt that is successful on your email service and it becomes hacked, it's important to have a contingency. So this is usually recommended by way of backing up your emails at least twice weekly, or at a maximum every 2 weeks, so that in case there's a successful hack attempt, you can go back to a time period that is not so far back. So if you do not keep backups of your emails, you might end up losing all the information of your organization from time immemorial. So it's always important to keep a backup. The next thing to consider is your password, the password that you use for your email. So the idea here is, for the most part, a lot of us have the one password that we've used from the very first time we set up our emails, just after high school or when we joined college or university. So that password is usually something very common, either your girlfriend, your pet, or something that you can easily remember. So you find that such simple things are the easiest point of entry for a hacker to come into your system. So the idea is, when you're making a password, take length as a higher consideration as opposed to complexity. Longer passwords are more difficult for people to hack than shorter passwords. So if you create a longer password, it will take a hacker a longer time to hack. So make it long. The other thing is, pick something that is easy to remember, but very hard for someone who does not know you to guess. This could be something as simple as your primary or high school guests, desk mate's second name. It could be something like your neighbor's favorite shoe size. It could be something that only you remember or know, but no one else can remember. It could be your grandmother's name. It could be anything. The next consideration when you're making a password, so a lot of us have passwords that are just one word. That's why they are called passwords. But another way to make passwords is to have passphrases. So this could be a sentence that only you can remember easily. It could be something in a local language, like, for example, mimi hukula chapati kila Wednesday. I'm not saying I like chapati that much, but that's an example. So the idea here is to have a phrase that someone who is outside of you would not remember easily. So such a long sentence would have like 20, 25 characters and makes it very difficult for anyone to hack. Two-factor authentication I had mentioned previously. The other consideration that is very important is, do not save your email password on a browser. So you can save the passwords that you use to log into other websites on browsers, but your email password is a level above every other thing, because for the most part, your email password has control over a lot of other things. So keep that under lock and key. Do not save it anywhere. Just keep it in your memory. Finally, change your password every 3 months. I know for some of us, we've kept the same password for 5, 10, 15 years. Change your password. It's time. Do it now after this very meeting. As I conclude, for a lot of us, we sign in or we sign up onto websites, or some websites require our emails to download a report or a tender application. And through signing up with our emails, we subscribe to their mailing lists. So a lot of the time, we never even go on ahead and read those emails, but they end up filling our inboxes. So this is your call to action to go on ahead and delete all those emails, because the more emails you have that you do not recognize, the higher are the chances for another one that you do not recognize to come in between those, and then you click it and you get hacked. So my colleague Anselm will proceed with the next phase of the presentation. Anselm?
Thank you so much, Collins. I think that was very elaborate, and I believe most of the aspects that you have touched on, because you are talking about email security. And that means people who interact with emails most probably interact with the internet. And so that means most of the attacks that people experience through emails are the same methods that attackers use for attacking web platforms. In this next section, we are going to look at how to secure your web platforms. It could be your website or your intranet, or even in a general sense, whenever you interact with any platform online. We want you to be able to identify some of these ways that attackers use in order to penetrate these web platforms. And in terms of our outline, this is what we are going to look at. First, to know what web security is and why it's important, and the key considerations that whenever you're making a security policy for your web platforms, some of the major things that you need to consider. We looked at number 3. Then we'll look at some of the web security threats, which I believe most have been mentioned when we were looking at email security. And then we'll also look at some of the ways in which you are able to protect your web platforms or be able to mitigate these security threats. And then we'll just conclude. So first of all, what is web security? And I think one of the most common terms that are normally used is cybersecurity. I believe that's what most people are familiar with. And web security is just an aspect of cybersecurity, because mostly it deals with the web platforms that either you have set up online or the ones that you interact with. And because right now everything is accessed online, and that means everyone being able to access any kind of information or even access any kind of website online means that causes a vulnerability to you as a person or even as a company whenever you set up any platform online. And so web security just involves every aspect that you do in order to protect either the information you have online, or even protect yourself as somebody accessing any kind of information online. And that is through either preventing it before it happens, or being able to detect it, or mitigating any kind of attacks that you might face. And 4 ways in which we interact with the internet is either we are browsing on the internet, just looking for information, or it could be you are trying to do a transaction online. And even mobile apps these days, you need access to the internet in order to access some of the services, especially if it's making or purchasing anything online. And then also we interact with our social media platforms, the accounts we have either on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And then lastly, we interact with the internet also through emails whenever we want to send any kind of communication to somebody who is in another part of the world. And so familiarizing ourselves with ways in which we interact with the website and being able to identify these security breaches hopefully will help you to be able to identify ways in which you can set up your security policy in order to address these kinds of issues. And then next, why is cyber security important? I think mostly is because, like I said, we interact with the internet every day, and the internet being able to be accessed all over the world by anyone makes it possible for anyone to cause any kind of threat to your web platform. So to you trying to access anything on the internet. And so security is a very important aspect whenever you are setting up a website or a platform online. Even later on, we look at some of the ways in which some of the things to consider whenever you are setting up a web platform online, or if you already have a platform online, some of the things you need to look at in order to protect yourself from cyber attacks. And then one of the reasons why also you need to consider web security is that normally when the attack happens, that's when you realize the seriousness of it. And even me as a developer from experience, sometimes we tend to take web security very lightly until it happens. And then that's when you know how serious keeping your platform secure online is. And this also tied to that is also that it also has to do with your reputation. Because if your website is vulnerable to attacks, then it means even the search engines would recommend to users whenever they search for something related to the kind of information you have on your website. And so web security is important also for reputation management. And also if somebody is able to attack or gain access to your website, we have seen experiences where a website was attacked, and then all the files were just deleted. And so data loss can be really costly whenever somebody attacks your website. And so you need to come up with ways in which to prevent these kinds of data breaches. And then technology also keeps on changing. And so it means you need also to keep on adapting to new ways of how people access websites, and any kind of technology that comes up. You need to be aware of them so that you know whether that is a threat or that is something that you can leverage on to your advantage. And then in terms of now in the corporate setting, I think right now information being readily available, even right now, if you just open your phone and Google, you are able to learn so much from the internet. And so this makes it, in terms of security, this makes it important also to be able to protect yourself and know these new ways in which people target web platforms in order to, the way criminals target web platforms in order to attack. And mostly these attacks are normally focused on the small corporate organizations, because they know they are just starting up. And so most of their focus is not on web security. And so that's why most of the attacks are towards the small businesses or corporate organizations. And then these days, another reason these days having an antivirus is not enough, because these antiviruses also are accessible. If somebody is able to get an antivirus and know ways in which an antivirus looks for malware, and then use that to engineer their own malicious code so that they're not that cannot be identified by these malware antiviruses. And so it's very important also to consider web security, especially if it reaches that level. You need to consider a higher ways of protecting your digital assets. And then lastly, as it has been mentioned, training your users on the importance of web security is also very crucial, because it helps them understand what is at stake, so that in case of anytime they interact online, whether it's through email or through browsing, they know the consequences of any kind of data breach that might arise because of either them being ignorant of these techniques that attackers use to gain access to web platforms. And so whenever you consider web security, there are three things that you need to take into account, especially when you are coming up with a web security policy for your organization. And first is privacy. Privacy is just making sure that the information that belongs within the premises of the organization stays there, and it's not information that can be accessed either by an authorized person who is not within the company, or anyone else who is not authorized to access such kind of information. And so whenever you're coming up with ways to mitigate these cyber attacks, you need to consider the fact that the data needs to be private and only accessible to those who are allowed to access it. And then the next is data integrity. Data integrity simply means that the information that you are storing online, or the information that you are sending through your email, the way you send it is the way the recipient is going to receive it, so that in between there's no change to the message or the data that you are trying to pass. And even in the context of a web platform or a website, ensuring that the information that you upload on the website represent the actual information that you want to pass out through your website. And so integrity is just making sure that the information you have on your web platforms is intact the way you have uploaded it or set it. And then lastly is authenticity. Authenticity simply means ensuring that the person sending that information is he or is the person they claim to be. And so authenticity just makes sure that when I am sending an email to Collins, when Collins receives that email, he is able to recognize that this email is actually from Ansel, either through looking at the email address or the email signature or the context of the email. So email authenticity is also a key consideration when you're coming up with ways to protect yourself or protect your web platforms online. And then the types of web security threats, some Collins has taken us through in the context of email, but these also apply to your web platforms. And number one, data theft or identity theft. Data theft simply means somebody being able to access your platform and steal the information that is there. And then identity theft is somebody pretending to be you and probably contacting your customer or your client on your behalf, requesting for either something, either data or something that they want to their own advantage. So identity theft and data theft are one of the ways in which cyber criminals use in order to gain access to a platform and steal data from them. Then next is malware, or as it's commonly known, viruses. So viruses, these are just programs that are injected either to a machine or in this case to your website in order to do something else other than what you intended for that website. And from experience, most malwares are normally used when, for example, if your organization, if it's a business, you're selling something online, or if it's an NGO, you have the programs you do, the projects you do, then somebody injects a malware that will change the information that is on your website, so that when somebody opens your website, rather than seeing the information you have, they look at either probably another website or a redirect to another website that sells legal stuff, or to some pornographic website. So malwares, it's still something that it's really important to consider because the impact of how it affects your web platform is very huge. And then next is ransomware. Ransomware, even from the word ransom, is when a cyber criminal holds you at ransom. And how this happens is that when they gain access to your data, and then they encrypt your data with an encryption that only them know how to decrypt. And so they ask you for money in order to release that data back to you. So that's what we refer to as a ransomware attack. And these ransomware attacks, most these days, the kind of encryptions that these cyber criminals use is normally because you need a key to decrypt that encryption. Then it means they're the only one who have that key. And so they hold you at ransom until you pay them some money in order to release that data back to you. So that's also one of the ways cyber criminals attack web platforms. Phishing, I think my colleague has mentioned about phishing mostly in emails, but also in web platforms. You find that whenever you have a form on a website or a comment section on a website, and then you'd find either a bot that is online or just some random people sending you messages through these forms that are relevant to the information or the content you have on your website. And most of the time, they will fill your inbox or your website with such kind of messages, which normally have links, which are very dangerous when you click on them. Either on email or on website, whenever you receive any kind of messages that is not related to, or a comment that's not related to maybe a post or an article that you have posted, then that is normally considered as a spam. And phishing is just making that, sending you a lot of those messages so that it's very overwhelming and it's very vulnerable, especially when you accidentally click on one of those links. Lastly, denial of service. Denial of service in the context of website is when somebody uses a malware that will use the resources that are meant for your website. The resources meant to load your website. So instead of loading your website, this malware uses those resources so that somebody is not able to open or see what's there on your website. And so these injections or malware, they use up all the resources meant for your website. And so when a genuine person trying to access your website is not able to access it because your website has been denied these resources. So that is what we refer to as denial of service in the context of websites. And then ways to mitigate this kind of threats. Let me just go to the next tab. So some of the security measures that you can consider to mitigate this kind of cyber attacks. I think, as we have been told before, security begins with you. And so it's very important to, whenever you are setting up encryptions or your accounts, it's important to set up strong passwords that cannot be easily guessed or cannot be easily used in order to access your accounts. And my colleague has given you ways in which you are able to leverage on that when you are setting up your email accounts or when you are creating other accounts using your email. And so these are 6 ways in which you are able to protect yourself using strong password. That is using a combination of all the capital, lowercase, numbers, symbols, mixing them together to form a text that is not easily, somebody is not able to easily guess. And so using such kind of strong passwords helps protect somebody who is trying to attack or gain access to your accounts. They're not able to guess this combination of characters. And then making the password at least 8 characters long is also a good security measure to use when you're setting up your passwords. Then I'll avoid using personal data like your name or your email address. That also helps somebody not being able to relate the password to your personal data. And then changing your passwords regularly, as it has been said, also it's very crucial. And then not using it for multiple accounts. So each account that you have needs to have like its own unique password, so that if somebody gains access to your Facebook with your password, then they cannot use the same password also to access your Twitter account or your LinkedIn account. So it's important to have different sets of password for each kind of account that you have. Then lastly, 2-factor authentication. This just simply means in addition to the password that you have, putting a security measure to verify that this is actually the correct person trying to gain access to this account. And so two-factor authentication just makes sure that at first, once you've entered your password, then the next will be a challenge, and most probably it's normally something related to either your proximity. So it could be something like how an example of Google, how it sends something to your mobile phone so that it verifies that you are the correct person who is trying to access this website. And then the second one is using an SSL certificate. So an SSL is a securities socket layer, and this helps in ensuring security when the visitors to your website are accessing your website. It helps on two levels. One is ensuring that secure communication between the users and your website, so that any kind of information cannot be retrieved during that communication between you when you're trying to open a website and the website being able to load that information back to you. And so SSL helps ensure security between that, helps ensure security within that channel of communication. And then also it helps build reputation, because Google will not index your website or will not show users your website if it's not a secure website. Or when somebody is an e-commerce and somebody sees that you do not have an SSL certificate, it will prompt them that this website is not secure. And so they will not be able to proceed and probably look at the products that you have. And so an SSL certificate is very important for any kind of web platform that you set up. And then next, choosing the right kind of technology. So this has more to do with when you are setting up this platform before you deploy it online. And so the kind of technology you choose when you are developing your website or your platform is very crucial. In that, when you are considering these technologies, you also need to consider their security aspects. And a good example is even in the software development area, where some people prefer to use either coding a website from scratch, or using a language framework, or using a content management system. Whichever you choose, one of the key considerations is looking at the security that either this framework or this content management system offers. And so choosing the right kind of technologies for development of your web platform is also a good security measure, just to help prevent those kinds of attacks before they happen. Then related to that is also the kind of tools, web tools or plugins that you use for your website. One of the major ways in which malwares find them, websites are attacked using malwares, is through this kind of plugins. And because most people are not willing to pay for these plugins, they opt for what we refer to as cracked or null plugins. And through these plugins normally have codes injected into them, so that when you use it on your platform, then that's when that code is activated. And either you start having phishing on your website, or a denial of service where your website is not loading because of these malwares. So also the kind of tools that you use, and also the source where you get them from, is also very important when you're considering security. Next is also keeping your software up to date. This has to do more with your workstation, the softwares that you use that uses internet on your machine. Also, they need to be up to date, and also from the source or the developers who develop those softwares. And so in those 2 points, by avoiding using counterfeit softwares, that's how also a security measure that is very important in protecting your digital assets and even your websites. Then the next is also the kind of hosting that you choose. So a web host is where your website is hosted. Like, let's say, for example, if it's MediaForce, it's mfc.ke, that's the domain. and that domain points to a server where the website files are hosted. And so it's very important also to consider the web hosting that you choose, so that when you are choosing the web hosting for your website, then the security offers that server provides, or that hosting provider provides, then it's very important also to look at what security measures do they have in place in order to help protect your web platform. And then next, we also have firewall. So firewalls, they are very crucial in terms of trying to limit what somebody is able to access and what they're not able to access. And the good thing about firewalls is that it can be used on so many levels, from the user machine to the website to the hosting. So you can have several layers of firewalls just to help restrict the kind of information that people are trying to access, and also to prevent unauthorized users from gaining access to either your web platforms or to your network in your office or to your machine. So firewalls are important to help prevent unauthorized access. And one of the ways in which even us, with the tools that we use for our security, firewall is very crucial, especially when you have people trying to either gain access to your website. And so the firewall is able to prevent or their IP, for example, when they try to access certain links on your website, or when they try to access links that does not exist on your website. So firewall is also a good security measure to employ on web platforms. Next is also an antivirus or an anti-malware software. So an antivirus can be deployed also on two levels, either on your website and also on your hosting, or the server where your website files are hosting. So on your website, it helps scan your website files just to ensure that they are not modified and that there are no unknown files on your website that you did not upload when you are deploying that website. And also on the server level, it helps also protect your server from unauthorized access. And so these anti-malware softwares are very important, especially for your website, so that it regularly scans your website to ensure that there's data integrity, and that it's only the correct files that you uploaded that are intact there. And then one mitigation also, or one measure that you can use in case of any cyber attack is having backups. Backups are very important whenever an attack happens to your website, because when your website is attacked, you already have a backup somewhere, either on your server or on your local machine, or it's stored somewhere in the cloud, so that you can always recover your website back in case of any attack. Then lastly is just educating your staff or your employees, or even you as a person trying to find out ways in which cyber criminals gain access to your website. And so training your staff on the importance of cyber security, web security, how they can protect themselves online is also very important to just ensure that even though you've employed some of the security measures within the organization, but also even the staff themselves are aware of ways in which they're able to protect themselves from cybersecurity attacks. And then lastly, is just the conclusion that web security is very, very, very important, especially in the context of organizations, because these days people leverage on data in order to beat their competition, or just in order to gain that higher standing in terms of ranking of some of the products or services that you provide. And so if you have sensitive information on your web platforms or on your local machine, then a web security policy which can be implemented and should be implemented to ensure that web security is activated on all levels, from the local user machine to your network, to the website, the web platforms that you have, even to your emails. And so even as I conclude, is just to encourage you and also some of the key things that we have identified, that to consider these ways of mitigating this kind of cyber attacks, and also identify new ways in which cyber criminal use in order to gain entry or access to your website. And so I think that's the final remarks from my presentation. And I think I'll just hand over back to you, my colleague Collins. And thank you so much for listening and for your time.
Thank you very much, Ansel. You've made a very good presentation, and I like how simple and easy to understand it is, even from us who are not as technically web developers as you are. So in this particular session, I would like to invite questions from those who have joined us. I see we are quite a number. So to manage interactions, I would prefer if you raise your hand, and then I would mention your name, and then you proceed to say the question. But as we wait for people to raise their hands, I will respond to the first question that has been posted in the chat. So Bernard asked if we could share some tips for creating strong passwords, but also easy to remember. So as we mentioned previously, Bernard, it's important to have a password that's very easy to remember for you. So the first consideration is that it should be a phrase, a word, or a sentence that only you remember. I could give you an example. Maybe your village is down in Kiandutu in Kiambu. So you could say, for example, kila jioni mimi huenda Kiandutu kununua maembe. That's a very long statement, but only you remember that particular arrangement of words. So it's very simple and long, and only you can remember. The other approach would be you make a short password that has a mix of characters, texts, and numbers, and lowercase and uppercase. So an example would be you use a name of your neighbor, for example, the shoe size of your child, and then you use an uppercase of your village name. So that combination of different elements that only you remember makes it difficult for a person with a malicious attempt to figure out your password easily and then get into your systems. So we will also share this presentation with those of us that have joined on email, so that we are able to even review beyond this. And of course, at MediaForce, we are always open to consultation. So if you've been facing any security issues or you need to learn more beyond this, then you can reach out to us on email, and then we are able to answer all your questions even more elaborately, because there's only so much that we can cover in an hour. Do we have any other question other than that one? Oh, so given that there is no one raising their hands, and it seems the Anselm's presentation was very good, and let me give myself a pat on the back as well. I believe mine was not difficult either. So I thank you very much for joining us. You're always welcome to engage us on any form of consultation you might have, business engagements, and also training. At MediaForce, we are a full service marketing communications company that is suited and has a team of skilled personnel that is able to address all your communication needs. So you can look through our website and reach out to us for any services that we offer. Thank you very much, and do enjoy your weekend.
Thank you very much. Thank you.